All right, we are live. Thanks for stopping in with us tonight, everybody. This is Coach Dan.
And got Coach Rob here.
Yeah, we're here with Grn Mchn Multisports. High five, Coach Rob. We're still working on it. Got it. All right, cool. Well, we appreciate everybody stopping in and joining us tonight. If you're watching this on the recording, make sure you check in and hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next one, so you can stop on in, chat with us, and hang out for a little bit. Tonight we're doing an interview with a very interesting character. You'll get to meet him here in a second. He's hanging out in the basement with us. Before we get into all that, if you notice this little bar going across the bottom here, it does say that we have subscriber chat only on. So if you want to participate with us in the chat tonight, just go ahead, subscribe to the channel, and within 5 minutes, you'll be able to participate, ask questions, and just hang out with us tonight. So we appreciate everybody coming in. How's your week going, Rob?
Not too bad.
Solid. Yeah, finally getting moving again, getting some training in. Let's see here. Let's bring this guy in. What do you say?
Let's do it.
We've got an athlete here. He's been all over the world. Super interesting guy. He's done all kinds of things in the endurance sports, and he's got a lot of really cool stuff to tell us tonight. Let's bring him in and meet him. This is Clint Seager. How you doing, Clint?
What's up, guys? Let me give you a high five this way. Boom. No, good to be on the show, Coach Dan, Coach Rob. How you doing, man? So yeah, it's like I said, nice to be here and talk about something other than, as you would know, fishing, Dan, for a change. So getting back to my roots, I would say, kind of thing. So yeah, glad to be here.
Yeah, you can see Clint's shirt over there. He's showing off his Circle Hook production shirt. He's got a really cool YouTube channel himself, so make sure you go check that out. I believe it's linked down in the description. If it's not, I'll make sure I do that after the show, but I'm pretty sure it's there already. We met each other through the fishing world and just competing against each other and got to talking, and we have a lot more in common than we thought. There's Courtney. She says, it looks like we practiced that high five. That's right.
We're trying.
Actually, we were backstage. Every week we get a little bit better. But yeah, we're trying to stick to the Thursday nights, and right around this time seems like a good time for everybody to wind down, talk a little bit about triathlon and the endurance world and that kind of stuff. And here's Margaret hanging out with us. She said, my thoughts exactly. We are rehearsing those high fives. We'll get it down one of these days. But yeah, so we got Clint with us tonight. And like I said, talking to him through the fishing world, he's got some really interesting stuff to share with us tonight. And just tell us how you got started in all this, Clint.
Yeah, so I would say it started around 96. My dad was a karate guy. I think he was like 7th Dan black belt, sparred against Chuck Norris when Chuck Norris toured South Africa. I'm South African, by the way. And we'll get more into that in terms of where that fits into the whole picture as well. But my dad was very much into karate and sports from that perspective. And as he got older, things changed, and he sort of had to move towards something which wasn't as physically demanding as doing karate and, putting your body into positions that are, way out there. So he got into running, and then more specifically into ultra running at that stage. And one of the main reasons behind that is South Africa has what's known as the Comrades Marathon. So it's actually the world's oldest and biggest ultra marathon. It started in 1921, and it was, and don't quote me on some of these figures. It's a long time since I've sort of gone through this, but it actually came about as a sort of way to acknowledge the fallen comrades of World War One. Because South Africa was a British colony, so it was very much about the British military and the British soldiers and that sort of thing. So it was a way to really put them up there on a pedestal kind of thing, and it just became the greatest race in the world. And today, 25,000 runners take part in a 90-kilometer or 56-mile race every single year. It started off very small, obviously, but today they cap it at 25,000, and the race fills up within a week. So you can compare that to the New York Marathon or London or whatever, but it's a race double the length with massive hills, elevation changes, heat, all that kind of stuff. So it's a very unique thing, and it's a very uniquely South African thing. A lot of South African families get into running that way. I actually met my wife because of that, and her dad, by chance, had also done 17 of those races. So it ends up being a very family-centric race that people, get to meet each other because of that. But coming back to how I got into it, it was, like I said, because of my dad. And it was a way to sort of connect with him As I was growing up, I was sort of becoming a teenager at that stage. In 96, I was around 13 years old. And because he was training the whole time for ultras, he was very busy with that. So he was spending 3-4 hours a day, going out for long runs, doing whatever stretching and stuff he did afterwards. And that took a lot of his time. And, I sort of understand it now, obviously, because I got into it myself. But for me, at least, it was a way to sort of connect with my dad and be with him while he was doing those things. So I started doing it with him and eventually got to the point where I felt that it was my sport of choice. I would play cricket at school and soccer and stuff like that. But running and maybe I would say cross country at school was sort of my main thing. But outside of the school environment, it was very much about training for long distance races. Now, the problem with that at that age was South Africa has sort of strict rules in terms of how old you need to be to take part in different distance races. So you needed to be, for example, 12 to run a 10K. You needed to be 16 to run a 20 miler. You needed to be 18 to run a marathon. And then you needed to be, at that stage, 18 to run the comrades. But when I got to the age of 18, they changed it to 21. So, so that actually put a sort of spoke in the works, and it upset me enough that I stopped running during that time of my life, sort of the early 20s kind of thing. And it took a long time sort of to get back into it, and it was only in 2010, for the 2010 Comrades Marathon, that a couple of my friends were actually doing it, and that encouraged me to get back into running again. So I joined the marathon club in my hometown, which most clubs in South Africa are known as a drinking club with a running problem. Almost all of them, and that's the great thing as well. It's a very social atmosphere. We would braai at the time trials. So a braai is what you would call a barbecue. So every Wednesday night we'd have time trials, either 4K or 8K, with a social sort of get together afterwards, drinking beers, just hanging out sort of thing. And it was because of that marathon club, getting back into running, getting back into doing that sort of thing, that I met my wife actually by doing that at the same marathon club. And then, from that perspective, the rest is history. So yeah, got into, that first Comrades Marathon, finished it with, I think it was 11 hours and 30 minutes. The cutoff is 12 hours for that race. So it's a very strict cutoff as well. And you get a very tiny medal. I've actually got one with me here. It's literally the size of my ring. So let's see if we can, come on, autofocus. Do something. Does that work?
Yep. There you go.
Yeah. So it's a very it's a very tiny medal, but it's a very sought after medal. And like I said, almost it's a household known event in the country. So a lot of people know about it. A lot of people aspire to run the race. And because of that first Comrades, then it pushed me into wanting to explore what the possibilities are in terms of driving the body further and further, pushing the mind further as well. I don't want to say that I felt a void after running that first Comrades, but I sort of did. When I crossed the line, I was like, okay, that was tough. It took a lot out of me. But at the same time, and almost immediately at the same time, it was like, man, there must be more. There must be something else I can do. And it wasn't long after that I found the Kalahari Yokrabi's Extreme Marathon. So what that is, it's a 250 kilometer or 160 mile self-supported desert race in the Kalahari Desert, which is a desert which sort of borders Namibia and South Africa. So it's like the northern part of South Africa. So it's going more towards much hotter regions kind of thing, much drier regions as well. It's actually one of the driest deserts on the planet. And yeah, that's where things started going in sort of a more crazy direction in terms of what I like to try and do with myself and how I would like to try and push myself. So I did that race it's actually 10 years almost to the day that I took part in that first one, because they do the long stage. So long stage is like 80 kilometers, but let's say between 70 and 90, because it varies each year depending on how they plot the route out. But they plan it so that it's on the last full moon towards the end of October, right? So that full moon coincides with the long run, so that you run through the night with the full moon shining and guiding the way, kind of thing. So it's pretty cool. But that race was crazy. From the perspective that it's self-supported, so they have, you got to carry your backpack with your food for the 7 days. Like they don't give you anything except water, and you got to, obviously plan your stages accordingly. So every every 5 to say 7 miles, they'll have a water stop. And all they're allowed to do is fill the bottles that you have, right? So you've got let's say you've got your backpack and you've got your 2 bottles here, maybe a third one, or a hydration sort of bladder kind of thing. They can fill it up to the top, but that's it. They cannot give you anything else besides that. No medical support, which can only be given by the medical team if it's needed and necessary. Other than that, you're sort of on your own, and you've got to follow the route markers and get to the finish for each day. And when you get to the finish each day, you take your sleeping bag out of your pack or off the top of the pack, throw it out on the floor wherever you find a space, and crash for the night. It's really a test of survival, I would say, as well.
So is this something that you have like a team supporting you along the way with, or are you truly on your own and then it's you and the other competitors who kind of band together and get through this thing together?
Yep, you're either on your own or you band with the other competitors. Like I said, the support crew, all they can do is give you water. Obviously, if you fall down or something at the checkpoint, they can obviously pick you up and help you onto a chair or whatever the case may be. But other than that, you can't really do anything. Even the vehicles that are parked at those checkpoints, you're not even allowed really to sit in the shade of those vehicles. Obviously, they do have a tarp or a tent kind of thing, so you can find shade there. But other than that, it's pretty brutal.
So how do you prepare for something like that? I mean, obviously, there's the two aspects to that: the kind of the survival aspect, and then there's the athletic aspect of it. So I guess kind of take us through how you get ready mentally, physically, what your routine was.
So I've done the race twice. The first one I finished, but I finished barely. It was a real struggle to the finish. And probably the reason was I had not prepared properly. I had just done that first Comrades Ultra Marathon, which I had to qualify for with a marathon under 5 hours to get to the Comrades, which is that 56-mile race. And in between that, I think I did one or two other 50K races as preparation for that. And then that Comrades marathon became my sort of ultra long run preparation for that stage race. And that was all in the space of 1 year. And I hadn't run for 10 years before that, even maybe more, maybe 11 or 12 years before that. So I sort of started end of 2009, and then by 2011 doing the big ultra stage races. So that first one, in terms of preparation, it was bare minimum. It was sort of going through the motions of just running the distance races that I thought were necessary to do what was physically needed. But in the following year, where I actually took 20 hours off my time from 2011 to 2012 on that Kalahari race. It's my proudest moment, I would say, in terms of really focusing and training on something. So what I did that following year was I actually focused a lot more on speed work, surprisingly. So there was, you would think that a race like that, you would need to focus more on time on the legs, those sort of things, getting like the really long runs in. But what I ended up doing was doing high intensity sort of speed work, doing 800 track work with the backpack on. So it'd be the 40-pound pack on the back, and do sprints with the backpack. And that would sort of emulate, because I didn't have sand. So the race itself has very thick sand. It's almost like, it's even worse than beach sand. I don't know how to explain. It's river sand, very dry, ancient river sand. And it becomes fine sort of powder over the years from erosion and those sort of things. So there was no way for me to emulate that in training. But what I found worked was doing that speed work with the backpack on, and it developed the right muscle groups and stuff that I could actually perform at my peak for that race.
Absolutely. That's incredible. We got a comment here from Margaret out in chat. And also, hey, Mom, what's going on? Thanks for stopping in. She says, well, I'm all for pushing yourself both mentally and physically, as all endurance athletes are. Yeah, we can all relate to that for sure. How do you mentally push through those long races with no to little support? So Margaret was actually one of the most, grueling races I did was a 3-day stage race, but I was kind of asking those questions earlier because I was able to have a crew with me who supported me. So while there were no aid stations out there, we had a follow vehicle, and they can make bottles and carry gear and everything. And Margaret was actually on my team. So I'm sure she's thinking a lot about Ultraman Florida, kind of thinking about this. And then she's saying, now you're doing it without support. How do you do that?
Yeah. I would say music. And I use music as a way to sort of set a tempo. So I would listen to a whole album of my favorite artist and album in between each checkpoint. And I did that for the entire race. So for the entire 40 hours of running or walking or crawling or whatever it was, I would listen to, and I would make sure that I finished each stage or each checkpoint stage in the time that that album would play through the headphones. It was actually a catch-22 because in South Africa, you're not allowed to listen to music during running races. So if you're running a normal marathon or the Comrades or a 10, whatever it is, half marathon, doesn't matter. You're not allowed to run with music. It's illegal, or it's against the rules kind of thing. So a lot of people don't train with it because you don't want to get used to it, and then you come to a race and then you sort of have to depend on the music to perform at your best. And that's actually what happened to me. From doing these kind of runs, it negatively affected how I would perform in regular sort of traditional races because I would sort of need that music to drive me ahead, and I wasn't able to use it. But in those long, like I said, in those long sort of support kind of thing, with no support kind of things, definitely something to take your mind off what you're currently doing, that sort of put your one foot in front of the other. Just anything, look at the horizon, look at the beautiful view, whatever the case may be. You had to do something to sort of find a different headspace kind of thing.
Yeah, kind of distract yourself from what you're going through and not look too far ahead. It was funny. I did a run as a pacer for one of my friends doing his first 50 miler, and he's a really ultra competitive guy. He's got a running company as well called Run Smart Online. He's a physical therapist, so he's got all the running biomechanics and whatnot. That's one of my buddies from Buffalo, Steve Gonzer, and he was so amped up for this 50-mile run that he was only allowed to have pacers for the second half. So the first half, he listened to the Civil War audiobook just to kind of mellow himself down and keep himself in check. So it is really interesting how you can kind of play off both sides of that for how it can really impact your headspace there. That's really cool.
Yeah. I think I also tend towards the side of enjoying my own company. And that's why, with the fishing and stuff as well, I can spend 12, 13, 14 hours out there on the kayak, for example, and enjoy my own company, just doing nothing kind of thing, right? And I sort of enjoy that. And it's a peaceful place for me. And I think a lot of ultra runners will sort of confirm the same thing, that, they enjoy their own headspace. They enjoy just being by themselves out there and doing what they love doing.
My mom says, I don't know how people do these races. Even when I was younger, I would never have thought about it. It definitely is something that builds, kind of like Clint was talking about. You do one thing and then you start looking at the next finish line.
That's right.
Margaret's asking, other than water that you pick up from the aid stations, what does your nutrition look like for races like that?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Margaret. So the first time I did that race, I focused on the only thing I knew at the time, which was carbohydrate, sort of high sugar stuff, and it was a huge mistake. So I would sort of get myself to be buzzing and then crashing almost instantaneously during the course of the day. And because the days were so long, I mean, let's say the stage was 40 kilometers, it would take 10, 12, sometimes even 13 hours to complete that stage because of how strenuous and tough the terrain is. There's stages where you're physically rock climbing to get to where you need to go. So taking sort of a high carbohydrate kind of supplement for something like that just didn't work. I was crashing badly. So I learned a lot from that. I focused a lot on the next year to taking sort of low GI supplements. In South Africa, we have I won't name the brand, but we have a brand which specializes in that. It's a very low GI energy drink. And then things like macadamia nuts, we call it biltong, you call it jerky in the US. Things like that could sort of last the distance and last those couple of days, but high fat, maybe not so much high protein, but I would focus more on the fat content to get me through the tough parts of it. Little bit of carbs thrown in here and there, but I would say for something like that, my body resonated with sort of a high fat sort of composition of a diet.
Yeah, and that can really help keep your mind a little bit sharper too. Speaking of which, here's our buddy Ryan Bortz. He says, I can't get along with myself. I argue with my other personalities. I would love to be a fly on the wall for kayaks or Ryan's kayak fishing adventures. He's another one of our fishing buddies, and that guy is wild. My mom says, it's very hard to even be a spectator. Trust me, been one lots of times. That's right. Best supporter in the game. And Margaret says, I feel that. So where does triathlon fit into this whole thing for you? I know you've done some triathlon there as well.
Not really. So I mean, you got the one picture on the thumbnail, so thanks for that. That's sort of
you got a picture you on a bike. It happened.
It happened, yeah. So I use cycling, and I actually made the comment on your last week live stream while I was in the chat. So I used cycling as a way just to sort of supplement the training, sort of the cross training kind of thing, off season work. There wasn't really an off season for what I was doing anyway. So, it was sort of always on kind of thing. But yeah, I moved to the Middle East eventually. That was around 2013, and then it was around, I think it was 2018. 2017 or 18, I can't remember exactly, but I did the Bahrain Middle East Championship, the half Ironman. So that's my only real foray into sort of anything more than just an Olympic triathlon kind of thing. I think I did a couple of shorter distances before that Ironman just as preparation, learning to swim without sinking, the usual kind of stuff, don't drown. I did one or two sort of team events where I did the running part and a friend did the cycling and another friend did the swim, where we sort of had our strengths kind of thing as well. Other than that, there wasn't really much into triathlon. I would have maybe done more if I stayed there longer and didn't move over here. But yeah, it's not something that sort of grabbed my imagination and attention as much as sort of ultra stage racing kind of did.
Yeah, you're definitely pretty deep into the running side of things over there, that's for sure. Here's Ryan trying to win brownie points with my mom. Hoping that one of his trips up to the James River coincides with some baking. She makes some delicious baked goods. That does not help with my training, but I can't say no. So I think what a lot of people might be interested in here is kind of how the elements played a factor in your training, because even if you look at the thumbnails and whatnot, you're all decked out in the sun blocking gear and you got the sleeves on and the sunshades, and kind of talk to us a little bit about how that played into it. And also, you're not in the coolest of states right now either. You're over in Texas, so it doesn't get any better over there.
Yeah, so I've sort of found myself in the hottest parts of the world over the course of my life, I would say. So South Africa is not hot. It's a very temperate kind of climate. It's very maybe comparable to maybe northern Texas or maybe some of the more central states of the US. So it has its different, it has 4 seasons as anywhere else would kind of thing. But then, running that Kalahari race, for example, that was extreme from an elements perspective. Sharp, jagged rocks, ancient riverbeds where, as I said, the sand became like a fine powder. Some dark colored rocks within those riverbeds, so the absorption from the sun would be pretty intense, and it would get up to 60 degrees Celsius radiation of heat from those rocks as well while you were going through those riverbeds. That's maybe 120, 130 degrees, maybe more than that.
I don't know.
You're the mathematician.
While you're running.
Yeah, so and you can feel that radiation of the heat. So another thing I would do that I did in training, and I would do it on the treadmill, is take a fan heater and put that on the highest temperature possible and just blow that hot, dry air into my face while running on the treadmill with the backpack, just to try and get whatever I can to sort of emulate and make myself ready for what I would expect there. And then, like I said, I moved to the Middle East. I spent a lot of time in Dubai, and Dubai was extremely humid. The summertime gets up to 120 degrees with 80-90% humidity. It doesn't cool down at night, so there's no sort of respite. You either train during the day or night in that heat, or you get on the treadmill, or you go indoors. And that was a pretty cool thing. They had it was called Dubai Sports World. So it was a 700-meter track or 650-meter track indoors through a sports center. So they had volleyball in there, and they had all sorts of things, basketball, whatever the case may be. So we used to spend a lot of time actually doing laps indoors in that place, and do actually like marathon distance training runs, running on that little 600-meter circuit.
That's a good size indoor track. A lot of the ones around here are 200 meters or so from what I've seen. Yeah,
and it had a couple of twists and turns as well, so it didn't have that monotonous kind of thing where you're just trotting along in a circle. You had to sort of, maybe shimmy a little bit, go around some corners, stuff like that. So that made it quite interesting. There were people all around, so you could watch people playing whatever sports they were doing, and things would change up all the time. So that was pretty cool. And that actually led on to Dubai actually hosting races like this indoors. And I actually won, I think it was 2 years in a row, I won a a 10-hour circuit race in the Abu Dhabi exhibition center. So it was sort of how many laps or how much distance could you do in the 10 hours. And I think I did 70 kilometers and I did 80 kilometers the year after that to get first place both times. Yeah, and it was a solid cement floor. So it's not, at least with asphalt or something, you got that it's a bit forgiving. But with plain pure concrete or cement, I was really glad I had Hokas on at the time because it was a killer on the legs.
Oh yeah, you sent me a picture. You had a whole stack of Hokas there. It's crazy. There's Margaret saying, "I'll never complain about heat training again." Yeah, that's one thing we work on with our athletes, especially if they expect heat or if they just want to be a little bit more adapted to unseasonably hot temperatures wherever they might be racing in the United States or the world. We have a little protocol. We go through that, and it's not the most fun thing in the world. But Margaret says she won't complain anymore about it.
I think you get accustomed. You get accustomed though to where you are. So it's very subjective. Like today, a hot day here, I would consider it hot, and I would be like, damn, it's just too hot for me to go for a run or to train. Meanwhile, I've done way worse than that in the past, but my body's sort of been deconditioned again to not know how to deal with that. So it just really depends where you are at that time in your career or your training life.
Yeah, for sure. It doesn't take too long, only a couple of weeks to start making some adaptations there physiologically. I know in the dead of summer, it can be 100 degrees every day here in Virginia. And when it's 88 in the morning, it feels like a breeze out there and you feel like you could put a jacket on. But now it's 77 right now in the fall, and you get out there midday or after work and you feel like you're about to die out there. So it definitely is.
There's sort of a mental aspect to that as well, I think. Just the way your mind plays tricks on you.
Oh, for sure. Definitely. Speaking of mental aspects, you have a really interesting accomplishment that I think you're ready to share with us there. And you got a little screen you'd like to share too, right?
I actually closed that off. Let me see if I can reopen it. Our friend in chat was sending so many Facebook messages that it was blowing up my browser here.
Would that be Mr. Ryan Bortz and Kayak Mike? I think so. But it's kind of speaking of pushing things to the next level and everything like that. And Clint's a big tech guy, so he has a pretty cool accomplishment he's about to share with us here. He's just going to dig that up, and we'll put the screen up, and he'll kind of talk about that. And definitely one of the things that I think will resonate a lot with our triathletes, just in a little different way.
So let me see if I can get this. Okay, there we go.
All right, here we go. We're going to pop that into the stream. All right, so what's going on here?
So this was August 18, 2017. And basically set the distance record at that time on Zwift. So as part of trying to find ways to train in the heat of Bahrain, so I was in Bahrain at this time, so it's another Middle East country, probably even more humid than Dubai, because it's a tiny little island, maybe 20 miles across, 40 miles lengthwise, and just surrounded by the ocean, obviously. And then there's a lot of fresh natural water in the soil as well. So it creates a lot of humidity. But as a way to sort of train and keep doing what I was doing, it was all about running on the treadmill at that stage. And then Zwift running just became a thing. And it was sort of in its infancy at this stage in 2017. And I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna run the longest distance anybody has ever done on Zwift. And that happened to be 50 kilometers that day. Just your average run of the treadmill, ultra marathon on Zwift.
That's funny. About 5 miles feels like a lot on a treadmill to most people, and you're over here running 50K on it.
Yep. And actually, so it's quite funny. I can't remember the names or whatever, but like this person here, there were actually people that started joining in. So if you remember, like on Forrest Gump, where people just started joining Forrest Gump, like it was like that. People just started joining in to run with.
That's awesome. Cool. So what'd that day look like for you? Did you get up early and start cranking it out, or would that take about 5 or 6 hours? It looked like
it was 5 hours 26, something like that. I actually wanted to go further, but I'd made lunch plans with the wife at the rugby club. So there were beers involved, and I was like, okay, we'll do a longer distance at a later stage, and that just never happened. So, I don't know what the distance record is now. It's likely 100 miles plus on Zwift. I'd like to actually check that out.
I would think so too. I was doing a little bit digging, trying to find that article you were talking about there, and I found somebody who ran the entire path of Watopia. Yeah. Which I don't know how long that is, but it's up there.
And And that run on the treadmill actually came from nowhere. It was almost like a day before kind of idea. Sort of, okay, I've got nothing better to do. It's too hot to go run a 30K. So let's see how far we can go on Zwift kind of thing. Went and bought some nutrition at the supermarket, and then got up the next day and smashed it out.
That's quite impressive. Just wake up one day and feel like running.
Yep. Like I said, it's a Forrest Gump moment. And as much as it was a Forrest Gump moment doing that, my sort of stopping running was also sort of that Forrest Gump moment where he sort of stopped in the middle of the road, turned around, and just went home. My dad had the same thing too. He was out on a run one day, and that was his very last run. He was out on a run, just regular training, stopped, took his shoes off, slung them over his shoulder, walked home barefoot, and just called it a day.
That's awesome.
And I think that just came from too much. It's trying to achieve too much, maybe too soon as well. I would still like to get back into it. I'm not 40 yet, and sort of the prime for ultra running is in the 40s. So I feel that I would still like to do it and maybe do bigger and better things than what I have accomplished already. So yeah, time will tell if I do get back into that and start doing those things again.
Yeah, I think a lot of us are kind of in that place right now with the world shutting down, races shutting down, and trying to get back into it a little bit. I know I'm like that. Rob's like that as well. I kind of ended the same way. I was doing one of those 4x4x48 challenges where you run like 4 miles within every 4-hour block for 48 hours straight, and you end up putting on 48 miles in that 2-day span. Mm-hmm. And I finished it, and I was like, all right, I'm going to take a week off and then get back to training. I got this half Ironman coming up, and I just never got back into it. That was probably a year and a half ago, and now we're just starting to get back moving again. And those breaks are important. We talked about that a little bit last week, and you were in chat for that, so that was good. And kind of speaking of spontaneity here, we're actually doing a show not next week, but coming up, talking about season planning and what you want to look for. So definitely tune in for that if you're watching this recording or hanging out with us in chat tonight. So we'll be doing that soon. People are heading into the winter. Their seasons are shutting down for the year, and we're starting to look to that next step next year. There's Margaret. Not one of your smarter ideas. And there's my mom. I see new knees in your future.
That's an interesting topic. Knees is an interesting thing. So I've heard from so many people that don't want to start running because knees is always the excuse. Like, no, my knees are bad, or I'm gonna damage my knees. But the people you see running in South Africa, especially, and doing the comrades, and because it's such a big, well-known, popular thing, and so many people do it, you get every shape and size person that runs it. Every shape and size you can imagine. You would look at that person and say, that's not an athlete, but they do it and they finish within the cutoff time. And they're staying healthy. They're reasonably fit. They're not getting injured. So obviously they're following the rules. They're doing the right things from a training perspective. They're resting correctly. Their nutrition obviously must be right. And yeah, I mean, the knees are surviving. I mean, obviously, yeah, shoes do play a role, I guess, as well. But a lot of people, especially in South Africa, again, it's not the richest of countries. So a lot of people can't afford the top of the line fancy Nikes or Hokas or whatever the case may be. And they run with what they have and they do it. And, it just goes to show that it's not the equipment, it's what you do with the equipment and how you go out there and perform.
So funny you bring it up, because I wanted to mention and kind of get, right now, Dan and I have kind of gone through this being swimmers. We had the super suit era with, the high-tech suits that eventually got banned. So, hearing that, people make do with what they can, what are your thoughts on, the running shoes that are coming out now that are, claiming, okay, we can decrease your time by 3%, that kind of stuff. But, they're charging what, $200, $300, $400 for those shoes.
They're up there.
Yeah. Technology is going to progress. I mean, there will be a time where maybe every single shoe has some kind of spring mechanism that drives performance maybe 10% ahead, and that's going to happen. I mean, it's just natural with the progression of technology itself. But I mean, runners and ultra runners and these kind of people started off running in tennis shoes back in the day. So in the 20s, they were running in these flat-soled, literally tennis shoes or little sneaker kind of things. So, a regular running shoe of today for them would have been this alien sort of device that would, change the whole game. And the same thing applies to today's times as well. It's no different to the latest technology on the wrist, right? So if you have the latest Garmin or whatever, it's giving you the readouts, and potentially you know in the future there'll be different metrics and different readouts that allow you to sort of compute and decide different things for your training and different things during a race. I mean, those are things as well which are very similar. So yes, obviously you have the physical aspect from a pair of shoes changing the dynamics of how your legs work, but then new information being provided to you is also a way to increase your performance, which people could say today is maybe an unfair advantage, but you know at some stage it'll be the norm. So eventually everything just becomes the normal thing to do at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple of really interesting YouTube videos out there. I think the New York Times put them on. One covers the 100-meter dash over the Olympic history and kind of the progression of the times, and it shows where athletes from the olden days would have finished in comparison to the athletes today. Another one was the 100 meters in the pool. And they go through this whole progression about how, you know, people used to just try and break that minute barrier in the 100-meter freestyle. And now it's the 55-minute barrier or 55-second barrier, then the 50-second barrier. Now we're getting closer to the 45-second barrier. And then they step back and they kind of show some of the technology advancements that came along the way. And a lot of that ties into kind of the conversation we're having here. So it does change things for sure.
Yeah.
And Courtney says she's shoe shopping, so she's listening to everything. But you know, on the same note as that, it's not necessarily all about the gear too. I remember back years and years and years ago, Margaret came on board with us. She had actually stepped down from triathlon because she couldn't run without getting injured. So we just kind of came back in, started working on the running form, which a lot of people think running, my knees are going to go bad. But if you change your running form as well, you can start to support yourself with your muscles instead of your skeleton. So a lot of that just comes down to fitness after that. And then you can kind of, the sky's the limit after you adjust those things.
Well, there's two aspects for me with gear. So for me, it's about comfort. It's maybe not so much about how fancy it is, what kind of technology is involved. Does it keep you comfortable for the duration of your event? And that's the most important thing. You don't want, obviously you don't want chafing. You don't want things like that. You want to feel confident enough to finish your race in one piece where you're not sort of itching and trying to adjust certain things to make sure that you're not thinking about that the whole time and not thinking on your actual performance. So that was one important thing for me, especially with road running. But then with the self-supported stuff, yes, technology and equipment did come into play because you obviously wanted the lightest backpack. You wanted the lightest equipment in the pack as well. Your cooking, obviously you had to have a little pot to cook your little meals at night on the fire, and your sleeping bag, you had to get the ultra lightweight down feather kind of things, the best on the market that you could find, or at least what you could afford. So for something, and from that perspective, yes, finding the right stuff and investigating and researching the right stuff came into play a lot. And I would say that 2012 race was a lot of the success of that was based on nailing down and drilling down into the right equipment for the run as well. Something as simple as the aluminum bottle that I wore in my front pack, the front pouch, which would actually keep the water sort of below room temperature kind of thing. It would actually cool the water down slightly and it would keep it there. And just having that water not hot, because the plastic bottles, the water would get extremely hot. You could actually put a tea bag in the bottle, and some people did. They'd put a tea bag in there just to make the hot water taste better and just have some tea rather. But having that water available that was cooler than the water in the plastic bottles made a huge mental difference as well. And feeling that cold water go down the throat, it was a game changer actually.
That helps you keep going longer. That's really interesting to talk about.
Actually, the first day, so before the race started, I got some ice from the freezer at the start of the race, put it in that front bottle. And that first stage was about 8 hours in 45 degrees Celsius weather temperature. And there were still ice cubes left over when I reached the end of that 8 hours. That's how well that little thermos bottle actually keeps the temperature in.
That's amazing. Yeah, that reminds me of something. I did a race out in Hawaii, and my one buddy went with me, and one of his ideas, it was our second time going there, so we had both experienced it. I came back the first time with like 3rd-degree blisters from sunburn and everything, so part of his game plan for the second attempt was to actually have like an ice cooling vest to wear all morning. And, we're jumping in the water, and it's almost 90 degrees swimming in the bay there. And he just brought his core temperature down. So I talked to him after, and he was actually impressed how long his core temperature kind of stayed down, even long after he was in that almost 90-degree water for over an hour swimming. So it's kind of cool.
One of the other amazing cheap device to bring your core temperature down and to use in events like that, or anything where you would expect sort of hot temperatures during the duration of the event, is just a microfiber towel. And you keep that wet, and as it's evaporating the water out of it, it sort of creates a bit of a cooling effect. So if you have that around your neck or something, and those have been used for ages now for cooling your core temperature, especially behind the neck. Maybe put it down the front of your shirt or something as well.
Yep. That's one thing that we suggest to our athletes to invest in. It's dirt cheap and can definitely be a game changer in warmer races.
Yep.
Yeah. Even when it's not warm, anything you can do to remove heat from the system is going to make you a faster athlete. Coming from the swimming world, we have divers, so they've got those little chamois towels, and that's pretty much what we suggest to our athletes. Anything that you sweat kind of gets reabsorbed into the towel, and they can wring it out over their head. Then it recatches everything around the neck, and just keeping those main arteries going to your brain a little bit cooler, kind of like when you're drinking that water, it's just a little bit cooler. Really gives you that a little bit of an edge and helps you feel just a little bit more comfort in a situation where you're really uncomfortable trying to deal with it. So definitely a huge, huge advantage with that.
We actually call it a Kalahari freezer. So even on the water bottles in the front pouches, we would wrap it with either a buff. So we had our Kalahari buffs, which were branded for the race. And we would use those actually and put the bottles inside that and then pour water over the buff itself. And then again, as that water evaporates off it, it cools the bottle down as well. Even though the ambient temperature is like extremely hot, it still has a cooling effect.
That's incredible. Yeah. So definitely a lot of cool stuff going on here tonight. You have any more questions tonight, Rob?
Yeah, I guess I have. So I know you mentioned, I think it was the Kalahari race you've done a couple times, and one time you didn't finish. So I guess for me, you don't hit your goal in 5K, 10K, and, that can be a letdown. I guess when it comes to a race of, I guess, a challenge of that caliber, something that you're putting a year, maybe 2 years into, like, how do you go about handling the mental side of not completing that or not achieving your goal?
So I did complete the first one. It wasn't that I didn't finish. I did finish, but it was almost like really slow, bad. I finished badly. I would just call it that. So that was sort of the driving factor to sort of push myself for the following year, to prove to myself that I can do better than what I did. Because I invested sort of my entire running career into doing ultra stuff. And the reason behind that was I'm not fast enough for 5K, 10K, half marathons. I'm reasonably okay, but I was never, not good enough to qualify for Boston or something like that, which is, a good triathlete would expect also or a good Ironman athlete would expect to also qualify for Boston as a gauge or a measure of performance. But my gauge or measure of performance was how far I can go and how well I can recover the following day after doing 100 kilometers, for example, or even the 100 milers. I started getting into 100-mile races as well. That was sort of the progression from the stage racing, was to do the single stage 100-mile events with 24-hour cutoffs. So that was something we haven't spoken about yet, but that was sort of the next step or the next sort of stage of the evolution. And like I said, it was more proving to myself that I could do more and I could recover better after doing it each time. That was sort of what I tried to achieve.
Very cool. Okay, so as we start to wind things down here for our people out in chat, let's see here. We've got, I just lost it. Here we go. So as we carry on with the show, like I said, we'll do some topics that we cover. We'll do some interviews with interesting people in the industry and whatnot. And any topics that you'd like us to cover, just let us know. You can write comments down below. You can email us at grnmchn Got a website, Facebook, Instagram, all that good stuff. You can get a hold of us pretty easily. If you've got a topic that you want us to cover, I know nutrition keeps popping up in just about every single thing we do. We do have plans to do something along those lines down the road, but shout those out, let us know, and we'll make a list and get that covered one of these days.
I think I got one more softball question. Catfishing or ultra running?
I think I know the answer to that.
It's a tough. So ultra running has a longer history, obviously, in my life. It's something that, like I said before, it's something I did with my dad. It's something we shared. It's something that I shared with my wife and her dad as well. So it's very much a family thing. I'm the only person in my family that fishes. So my mom does as well, but not to the extent of what I try and accomplish for myself. So running and the athletic side of things will always have, I think, that softer spot. Right now, like at this present moment, catfishing from a kayak is sort of the sport of choice at this moment. But like I said, I would like to get started, at least before I turn 40, I would like to start again with at least some form of endurance activity. It could be getting on my bike again. I actually signed up for a cycling race. It was the MS 150 when I arrived here in the US. That was the end of 2019, and the race was supposed to happen in April or May of 2020. And then obviously because of COVID and stuff, the race got cancelled. And I think, Dan, you have the same reasoning behind getting into catfishing and that sort of thing. It's what happened with me as well. The race was cancelled. It was sort of like, man, what do I do now? Like, I wasn't really in the mood anymore to train for nothing kind of thing. And then I discovered the whole fishing thing. So, that sort of took off from there. But it's not to say that I won't get into the endurance sports side of things again.
Yeah, I feel you on that one. That's kind of something I've done my entire life in my background, whether it was playing soccer or pretty quickly getting into running and then swimming, triathlon, all that stuff. So I'll definitely be swinging around full circle myself too. It's hard to stay away, but it's really hard for Clint to answer that question right now because he just caught his biggest kayak catfish ever. Nice. He just put a video out about it on his channel. So definitely go check that thing out. We're talking about a fish right around that 60-pound mark. That thing was a monster. Here's a question from Mr. Blue Collar Ryan Bortz. He said, how would you say your training has helped you in everyday life?
That's a good question, Ryan. So it's about discipline, self-discipline. When you're training for something like what we've been talking about, it means getting up at 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning to do it before work. It means sacrificing time for other stuff. It means sacrificing going out with buddies and drinking if that's what you want to do. So I was lucky to have the friends at that time that got me back into it that were doing it as well. So it was a very friend kind of thing. Like I said, I met my wife doing it as well, so that was cool. But definitely, it's more like I say, self-discipline kind of thing. You got to force yourself to make the right choices and do what's right for your aspirations with the endurance.
That's funny. Ryan was actually looking through our channel here, and he saw our Grn Mchn Need for Speed 1 mile challenge, and he said, "I'm not a runner, but I think I could do that." So we might get him on that plan. We might get him to commit to that. That'd be awesome. We could do a whole series on that. Ryan has his own show as well. He just did a show tonight. He was out pan fishing, doing some of that. That was pretty cool. We were checking that out before he hopped on here for sure. But yeah, it definitely carries over in a lot of aspects there, and being able to compartmentalize and really plan everything out, it takes a lot. And having that support crew really helps a ton. We talked a little bit about that last week too.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I remember, so before I was old enough to sort of start doing it with my dad, I remember obviously going to all the races. We would also wake up at 3 in the morning. My mom would pack sandwiches and stuff, with it, in the foil or whatever. And we would end up arriving at the race at 4 a.m., my dad getting ready, hanging out with his buddies, his race buddies or whatever. And then, we would sort of have to find things to do. I actually did a lot of fishing at some of those races because a lot of them were at lakes or at rivers and stuff like that, where there was the family could also have an enjoyable day out while the athletes were doing their thing. So a lot of my fishing actually started off because of my dad running. And I would, obviously with going to races and stuff, it had that interconnection so that the two sort of merged together in a way from an early age, which and gave me good memories from an early age that I can sort of keep with me today and make the most of it today.
Coming right around full circle here. Look at that. Yep. That's cool. All righty. So Margaret says she wants to talk a little about injury prevention. We can certainly do that. Remember, everybody out there, that you can tell us what topics you'd like us to cover in the future, and we will work on that. That's for sure. So we appreciate everybody hanging out with us tonight. Any last minute questions for our guests here, you can type those in chat as we start shutting things down, and and we'll look forward to our show next week. What are we talking about next week, Rob?
I think we're going to try to do a Q&A. We get enough feedback, questions in, and try to answer those. And I think we'll come up with another topic.
Yeah, that's right. We're talking about having like an open floor plan thing, so we'll open it up to the triathlon clubs and whatnot, and anybody wants to pop in and just kind of ask questions, and we'll kind of let the show run its course kind of wherever it's headed without an agenda. So that's what you can look forward to next week. And like I said before, eventually we'll swing back around in the not too distant future and talk about season planning, because I know that's on a lot of people's minds right now. But, well, Clint, thank you for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thanks for that. Definitely some cool things that you've been through.
Now you've got your story captured on video forever.
Yep. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
We'll see you. I'll go jump on Zwift and I'll see you on there. We'll see if I'm going to ride, and we'll see if you can outrun it.
I'll outrun you. Game on.
I got my subscription after all these months, so I better go use it. All right, everybody. Well, we're going to shut things down here. Thanks again for joining us tonight. And we will be back very soon on a Thursday at nighttime. We'll see you then. Bye now. Oh, yeah, one more high five. All right, we'll figure it out. Maybe next time.
Next time.
All right, see you, everybody.
Cheers, everybody.